Hello, bonjour, welcome, bienvenue. Today's video is intended to complement one that I've already posted, showing how to perform a table lookup operation. Now, in that other video, I showed how to search a data range for text and return the lookup text. But in today's example, I'll show how to search a data range for text and return a lookup number, and then use that number in a subsequent calculation. This example is probably more relevant for my colleagues working in the sciences. And this application illustrates a general principle for the use of Excel in the sciences. Namely, if you frequently search for the value of a physical constant, and then you use that value in a calculation, you should consider preparing a spreadsheet that looks up the value and then performs the calculation for you. For example, graduate students in my research group frequently prepare buffers in which they perform kinetic studies at a constant pH. In order to know how to prepare a given buffer solution, they have to know the pKa of the buffer, and so they frequently look up its pKa value. So for this example, I've compiled a list of commonly used buffers and their corresponding pKa values, and I've entered that onto a workbook sheet that I titled Buffer List. Now on the sheet that I've named Buffer Proportion, I'll show you some formulas that will allow you to choose a buffer from this list, perform a lookup of its pKa value, consider a user entered or inputted pH value, and then perform a calculation of the proportion of acid and the proportion of conjugate base that would be formed at that pH. So first, in cell B1, I want to restrict the user to selecting a buffer from the list found on the buffer list sheet. So I've already shown how to do this data validation in another video. I simply go to cell B1 and then click Data, and then Data Validation. I want to specify that the inputted data will be from a list, and the source of that list is found on sheet buffer list, cells A2 to A8. And I can add an input message to guide the user So to show you how this works, I click the down arrow and then I can choose MOPS from the drop-down list. Restricting the input to a defined list means there'll be no errors in the subsequent lookup function. Now in cell B2, I can enter the formula at the heart of this tutorial. I type equals XLOOKUP. Now remember, the XLOOKUP function works in any direction and does not require that the data be sorted, so I highly recommend it. Bracket. The lookup value is found in cell B1, and the array in which Excel will look up this value is found on buffer list, cells A2 to A8, and the array that contains the value to be returned is found on buffer list in cells B2 to B8. Close bracket, return. And we can see that this has returned the pKa value of MOPS. And if we change our buffer selection to MES, the pKa value changes accordingly. Now we can complete the exercise with a simple calculation based on the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. So let's say we want to prepare a buffer at pH 7.4. in cell B6, I'll enter the formula to calculate the percent of the conjugate acid of the buffer that would be formed at that pH. So the percent of conjugate acid is equal to 100 divided by bracket 10 to the power of bracket pH absolute minus pKa absolute close bracket plus 1 close bracket return. And I made these references absolute so I could simply drag them over to the conjugate base calculation and then edit the formula really simply to make it 100 over 10 to the power of pKa minus pH. And you can imagine how you could expand the function of this spreadsheet to have it guide you much further in the preparation of the buffer solution. But this simple example illustrates how you can use the XLOOKUP function to search a list of reference values and perform a specific calculation rather than looking it up manually all the time. It also works very well in conjunction with data validation that restricts a user to selecting the lookup value from a list, so there are never errors in the following lookup procedure.